You know, I always thought my life was simple, but full of little things that made it worth living. I lived alone in a small but comfortable house in the Brookline neighborhood in Boston. The morning air always brought me a sense of calm, soft freshness that made my heart beat slower and steadier. Every morning, I would make my coffee, listening to the local radio talk about the weather and the day's news. The smell of coffee would fill the kitchen and wrap around me, creating a warm and comforting embrace. The radio would play an old tune, one that made me think of the good times with my husband, when life seemed lighter. I wasn't in a hurry for anything. I woke up early, with the soft sunlight filtering through the living room curtain. I didn't go out much, but I made it a point to visit the church on Sundays. It was a nice walk to get there, and I liked looking at the trees that bloomed in the summer and the leaves that fell in the winter. My only son lived in another city, but he would call whenever he could. My grandchildren were small, but they always left sweet messages on my phone. I wasn't rich, but the house was paid off, and I felt secure. It was the kind of life that seemed to offer little, but in reality, gave me everything I needed. I considered myself happy, or at least at peace. The neighbors always greeted me with a smile, and I would return the favor with a good morning, or a quick chat at the gate. Sometimes I'd go the whole day without seeing anyone, but I never felt too lonely. There were the plants in the garden, the crochet I did to pass the time, and the routine that gave me purpose. Every day, I made lunch with care, even if it was just for myself, and I would sit at the table as though I were waiting for someone. It wasn't much, but it was my life, and I was comfortable with it. Then, he showed up. It wasn't anything extraordinary, really. One day he appeared at my door with a basket of fresh bread. I didn't even know he was the baker in town, but soon enough, I found out. He was a young man, maybe in his 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He greeted me with a warm good morning and offered me some bread for free. I think he saw that I lived alone, and maybe that's why he wanted to be kind. I was surprised, but I accepted the gift with a smile. I always thought that sort of gesture, simple kindness, was beautiful. Over the next few days, he came by more often, sometimes with more bread, other times just to chat. He told me about his work at the bakery, how he loved waking up early to make everything fresh, and even about his dream of opening his own bakery. I would listen attentively, enjoying the sound of his voice. He had a contagious laugh, one that made the atmosphere lighter and more inviting. I don't know exactly when it happened, but soon enough, we became friends. He told me he liked to talk to me, because, next to me, he felt a peace he couldn't find with anyone else. And, without realizing it, I began to look forward to these visits. I became a little happier when he came around. It seemed like the loneliness that hovered over me disappeared for a few minutes. Every word he spoke was like a fresh breeze that swept away the dust from my routine. I know it might sound strange, but up until that point, I hadn't felt this way about anyone since my husband passed away. But with him, I started to feel something different, something I hadn't felt in a long time, something like hope, a spark. And without meaning to, I caught myself thinking, maybe life still has something to offer me. It was a Thursday morning, a bit cooler than usual, and I was sitting in my kitchen, sipping my coffee, and watching the birds outside. The sun was still low in the sky, casting a soft glow through the curtains. Everything was calm as usual. And then I heard the knock on my door. At first, I didn't think much of it. Perhaps it was one of the neighbors, or maybe a delivery. But when I opened the door, there he was, the baker, holding a basket of warm bread. His smile was as bright as ever, and his eyes sparkled in a way that made my heart flutter. Just a little. Good morning, Mrs. Harper, he said, his voice warm and friendly. I thought you might like some fresh bread today. It's on the house. I was caught off guard, but I found myself smiling back at him. I wasn't used to such kindness, especially from someone so young, and it felt nice, like a little gift from the universe. I thanked him and took the basket, our fingers brushing for just a moment, and that simple touch sent a small shiver down my spine. I don't want to trouble you, he continued, his tone a bit more shy now. But I was wondering if you'd like some company. I've got a little time before my next batch, and you seem like a person who could use some good conversation. I hesitated for just a moment, But then I remembered how quiet my life had been. The days often felt long and empty, and the idea of talking to someone, especially someone so pleasant, seemed like a nice change. Plus, there was something in his voice, in the way he looked at me, that made me feel like I could trust him. So, without thinking too much about it, I stepped aside and invited him in. We sat at my kitchen table, and he began telling me all about his bakery, how he had started working there when he was just a teenager, and how much he loved baking. There was a passion in his voice as he spoke, something that made me want to listen more. I'd never been much for baking myself, but I found myself intrigued by his enthusiasm. I could tell he took pride in what he did, and that was something I admired. As we talked, I began to notice how easy it was to be around him. He had a way of making me feel comfortable, like I had known him for years. His laughter was genuine, and there was a lightness about him that seemed to fill the room. I hadn't felt this way in so long, like someone was genuinely interested in me and in what I had to say. I've always admired people like you, he said after a while. Looking at me with those warm, brown eyes, you've got such a calm energy. It's nice to be around someone who doesn't rush through life. I felt my cheeks flush at the compliment. It wasn't often that anyone said such things to me, and certainly not with such sincerity. Most of the time, people treated me like I was just another elderly woman, stuck in her own little world. But he made me feel seen, like I still had something valuable to offer. We spent over an hour talking. He told me about his dreams of opening his own bakery someday, about his family, and even about his love of the quiet life. There was something familiar about him, something that made me feel at ease. I wasn't used to having someone so young, so full of life, wanting to share their thoughts with me. Before he left, he promised he'd stop by again soon. Maybe I'll bring some pastries next time, he joked with a grin. I smiled back, not fully understanding why I felt a warmth spreading through me. But I knew I wanted to see him again. As I closed the door behind him, I stood there for a moment, letting the silence return. But it felt different now. The house didn't feel quite as empty, not with the memory of his smile still lingering in my mind. I told myself it was nothing, just a friendly visit, but deep down, I knew something had changed. I hadn't felt this good in a long time. Days that followed were, for lack of a better word, a pleasant blur. He came by often, almost every day, bringing something new, a loaf of bread, a batch of croissants, or even just a little note to say hello. His visits became the highlight of my week, and, before I knew it, I started to look forward to them with more anticipation than I cared to admit. I told myself it was nothing, just friendship, just simple company, but I couldn't deny the flutter in my chest whenever I saw him standing at my door with that warm smile. There was something about him that drew me in. He was always kind, always gentle, but there was also a quiet confidence in him that I couldn't ignore. He seemed to have this ability to make me feel like I mattered, like I was the most important person in the room, even though I knew better. I was just an old woman living in a small house on the edge of town, but when he looked at me, I felt special. It wasn't just the way he spoke to me, it was the way he looked at me, like he was seeing something more than just the surface. His eyes would linger on mine for a second too long, and I'd feel a warm rush spread through me. It wasn't that I was unaware of my age, or the years that had passed since I had last felt any kind of real affection, but with him, I started to feel young again, in a way I hadn't felt in so many years. His attention was like a balm, too. My lonely heart, and I couldn't help but welcome it, even though part of me knew it was a dangerous game. We began to talk about more personal things. He asked about my past, about my husband, about the life I had lived before he came along. I found myself telling him stories I hadn't shared with anyone in years, not even my own son. He listened intently, never interrupting, his eyes full of understanding. It felt so good to have someone who genuinely cared about what I had to say, who didn't judge me or look at me with pity. One evening, after we had finished our tea and I had shown him the latest crochet blanket I was working on, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You're really something special, Mrs. Harper," he said softly. "You have this warmth about you that's hard to find in people these days. You remind me of my grandmother in a way. She was always so calm, so full of love. I used to visit her all the time when I was younger." I could feel my heart swell at his words. I was used to being called kind, but the way he said it, with so much sincerity, made me feel like I was truly something more. It made me feel like I mattered. Like I wasn't invisible. I wanted to tell him how much I appreciated him, how much I looked forward to his visits. But there was something deeper that was beginning to grow inside of me. Something I didn't want to admit, not even to myself. And then, one afternoon, it happened. He was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his fingers tapping lightly. On the wood, I couldn't help but notice how handsome he was, how the sunlight from the window made his hair glow. He looked so young, so full of life, and I found myself wondering for the first time if he saw me the same way. I've been thinking, he began, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. Maybe you'd like to do something special sometime, just the two of us. I could take you out for dinner, or we could go for a walk in the park. I promise it'll be fun. I stared at him for a moment, not quite sure how to respond. I had spent so many years being independent, focusing on my own life, that the thought of someone wanting to spend time with me in that way caught me off guard. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the warmth that spread through me at the thought. He wanted to spend time with me. He liked me. Are you sure you want to do that? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I mean, I'm not exactly young anymore. He laughed softly, his eyes sparkling. You're more than young enough for me, he said, and in that moment, I could see it the way he was looking at me, not as an old woman, but as someone he wanted to be close to. My heart raced in my chest. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. The idea of being with him, of having him by my side in a way that felt so intimate, sent a rush of excitement through me. But it also made me feel something else, something deeper, darker, that I didn't want to acknowledge. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't how things were supposed to be. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All I could think about was him and the way he made me feel. I should have known better. I should have listened to that little voice inside my head that kept telling me something wasn't quite right. But the truth is, I was so caught up in the way he made me feel special, wanted, seen, that I pushed all those doubts aside. And when he asked for my help, it didn't seem strange at all. It felt like the next natural step. It started out small, just a simple request. He told me that his bakery was struggling, that things hadn't been going well. I could see the concern in his eyes, the same concern that had once made me think he was just a good man trying to make his way in the world. He said he had a chance to expand, to open a new shop, but he needed some financial help to get it off the ground. I remember sitting across from him at my kitchen table, listening as he spoke, his words flowing with such urgency and sincerity that I felt like I couldn't refuse him. I know it's a big ask, he said, his voice low, almost as if he were ashamed to be asking for help. But if you could lend me some money just to get started, I'll make sure to pay you back, I promise. I just need a little push to get this dream going. He looked at me with those warm eyes, and I felt that familiar tug in my chest, the one that always made me want to help him. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like I was giving him everything I had, just a small amount to help him get by. I'd always been generous, always believed in helping people when they needed it, and he needed it. He was a good man, wasn't he? He'd been nothing but kind to me, and I knew how much he cared about his dream. I hesitated for only a moment, long enough to consider what was at stake. But then I saw the sadness in his eyes, the worry, and all my doubts melted away. I wanted to believe in him, in us. I wanted to be part of something again, to feel needed in a way I hadn't in years. So, I said yes. The transaction was simple. He asked for my bank details so he could transfer the money back to me once the business was up and running. I didn't think twice when I gave it to him. He promised he'd send me the money back, but I was so eager to see him succeed, to see him happy, that I didn't dwell on the details. That night, I lay awake in bed, thinking about how kind he had been to me, how much he had listened to me, understood me. I told myself that I had done the right thing. He was going to repay me, and we'd both be better for it. It felt good to help him, to feel that sense of purpose again. But then, the next day, something strange happened. I went to check my account just to make sure everything was in order, and noticed that not only had he taken the money I'd given him, but there was no sign of any repayment, no deposit like he had promised. My heart sank. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. Maybe he was busy, I thought. Maybe things hadn't gone as planned, and he just needed more time. But then, another day passed, and another, and I didn't hear from him. I started to get worried. I called him, left messages, but there was no response. Each time I picked up the phone, I felt a lump form in my throat. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The doubts that I had pushed away started to resurface, one by one. How could I have been so blind? The truth hit me like a slap. Across the face, he wasn't the man I thought he was. I had trusted him, believed in him, and he had taken advantage of me. I had let my loneliness, my desire for connection, blind me to the reality. I had been so eager to help him, to feel important in his life, that I had missed all the signs, the way he always seemed to need more, the way his stories never quite added up, the way he was always busy when I tried to reach him. I was left alone with the cold realization that I had been tricked, and what hurt even more was that I had given him more than just my money. I had given him my trust, my time, and my heart. And now, all I had left was the emptiness in my chest. And the echo of his empty promises, I don't know what I was expecting when I finally tracked him down. Maybe I thought that when I saw him again, I'd feel some sort of relief, as if everything could be explained away with a simple excuse or a rushed apology. But when I stood there on the porch, waiting for him to open the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to face the worst moment of my life. I had spent the last few days trying to keep my mind occupied. I did the laundry, watered my plants, and even went to church on Sunday. I told myself that maybe he was just having a hard time. Maybe there was a delay, or something unexpected had come up. But deep down, I knew I was just lying to myself. The money was gone. I couldn't ignore that anymore. When he finally opened the door, he looked the same warm smile, eyes that sparkled like they always did. But this time, there was something off about him. He seemed nervous, shifting from foot to foot, and the usual ease in his voice was replaced by an awkwardness I hadn't heard before. Mrs. Harper, he said, his voice sounding too casual, like he was trying to cover up something. I wasn't expecting to see you today. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, about the money. You promised you'd pay me back, but there's nothing. No deposit, no call, no explanation. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the side. For a moment, I thought he might tell me the truth, that something had gone wrong, that he had a reason for everything. But instead, he looked at me with that same pleading expression that had always worked before. Mrs. Harper. I'm so sorry, he began, his words tumbling out in a rush. Things got complicated. The bakery? It's been a lot more difficult than I thought. But I swear, I'm going to make it right. I promise. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I couldn't. Ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach, the cold dread that was creeping up my spine. I had heard those words before. I had trusted those words, and look where it had gotten me. I can't do that anymore, I said, my voice breaking as the weight of the situation hit me full force. You took my money, and you promised to repay me, but you haven't. I don't know what you thought was going to happen, but this is over. I can't help you anymore. He took a step closer, reaching out to touch my arm, but I pulled back instinctively. Please, don't do this, he pleaded, his eyes widening with panic. You have to understand, I never meant for this to happen. I just wanted to make things right, to give you a better life, to show you how much I care. I'm not a bad person, I swear. His words were full of emotion, and for a moment, I almost believed him again. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the way his voice cracked with what sounded like real regret. But then, I remembered everything. The lies, the empty promises, the way he had made me feel like I was the only one who mattered. Until I wasn't. No, I said, shaking my head. You never cared about me. You only cared about what I could give you. And now, you've taken it all. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I don't know who you really are, but I'm done. Asterisk, he stood there, frozen, as if the weight of my words had knocked the breath out of him. I saw the panic in his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at me with so much affection, now filled with guilt and fear. Asterisk, please, just give me a chance, he said, his voice desperate. I'll fix it, I swear. Please, don't turn your back on me. Asterisk, I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my racing heart. I already have, I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. Asterisk, I turned and walked away, not looking back. As I made my way down the porch steps, I felt the heavy weight of what had just happened. The man I had let into my life, into my heart, had taken everything I had to give and more. But now, there was no going back. No more excuses, no more chances. Asterisk, the silence in the air felt suffocating as I walked back to my house. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had been fooled by his words, his charm, and the loneliness that clouded my judgment. But now, the only thing I could hold on to was the painful truth. Asterisk, I had been deceived, and I was left with nothing but the pieces of my broken trust. I sat there in my chair, staring at the phone in my hands. The silence around me felt suffocating, like a heavy blanket pressing down on my chest. The house, once a place of comfort and routine, now seemed hollow. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind outside the window, felt louder, as if mocking me for being so naive, so trusting. Asterisk, I had spent the last few days trying to make sense of it all, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed impossible to accept. He had been so convincing, so real, his kindness, his charm, everything had felt so genuine, and yet it was all a lie. A carefully constructed web of lies that I had willingly walked into, believing I was helping him, believing he truly cared about me. Asterisk, I knew I couldn't keep living like this, drowning in the bitterness and hurt that now filled every inch of the house. The money wasn't the only thing I had lost. My dignity, my trust, all of it was gone. It wasn't just the betrayal that cut the deepest. It was the realization that I had let myself fall for it, that I had let myself believe in something so easily manipulated. Asterisk, I had always been cautious with my heart. My husband, God rest his soul, had taught me that. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten the lessons of my past, convinced that maybe, just maybe, I could find someone to share the rest of my life with. Someone who would see me, not as an old woman, but as someone still capable of love. I had believed in him. I had trusted him with everything. Asterisk, and now I was left with nothing. Asterisk, I called my son, finally, after days of hesitation. I needed to hear his voice, needed to feel like someone cared about me, like I wasn't completely alone. When he picked up, his voice was warm and familiar, but there was a tension there, a slight edge in the way he spoke. Asterisk, Mom, is everything okay? Asterisk, I tried to steady my voice, but it cracked, betraying the tears I had been holding back. Need to tell you something, I said, my throat tight with emotion. I've made a mistake. A big one. Asterisk, there was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his voice softened. Mom, what's going on? Asterisk. I gave money to someone, a man I thought I could trust. He's the baker in town, and he asked for help. I thought I was doing something good, but now I see it was all a lie. He took everything I gave him and vanished. Asterisk, there was a long silence before he spoke again. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? You shouldn't have trusted him. I don't care how charming he seemed. You've got to be careful with people like that. Asterisk, I could hear the frustration in his voice, and it made the guilt even worse. He was right. I should have been more careful. I should have known better. But I was so desperate for connection, for someone to make me feel like I still had value, and I had paid the price for it. Asterisk, I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice softer now. I'm coming up to see you. We'll figure this out. Okay. Asterisk, I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I was grateful that he was coming, but part of me felt like it was already too late. The damage was done, and no amount of help could take away the hurt that was lodged deep inside me. The shame, the humiliation, it all felt like a weight that I couldn't escape from. Asterisk, after the call, I sat in the silence of my living room, the phone still pressed to my ear. I didn't know what I was expecting, a miracle. An explanation that could make sense of everything. No, there was nothing that could fix this. I had been taken in by a lie, and the truth was, I had only myself to blame. Asterisk, the next few days dragged on. I barely left the house. I couldn't bear the thought of running into him or anyone who knew what had happened. I couldn't look at the empty spaces in my life without feeling the void left behind by his betrayal. Asterisk, I spent most of my time sitting by the window, watching the world go by. People were living their lives, going about their business, while I was stuck in this prison of my own making. The pain felt so sharp, so raw, that it was hard to breathe without feeling it in my chest. Asterisk, it wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal of trust. The realization that I had let myself be fooled by someone I thought I could trust, and the worst part was that I had no idea how to fix it. Asterisk, when my son arrived a few days later, I was relieved to see him. His presence was a comfort, even though I knew he was just as frustrated with me as I was with myself. I could tell by the way he looked at me, that mixture of concern and disappointment in his eyes. But he didn't say anything at first. He simply wrapped me in a hug, and for that moment, I let myself lean into him. Asterisk, Mom, we're going to get through this, okay? He said softly, but you've got to promise me something. No more trusting strangers like that. You can't keep doing this to yourself. Asterisk, I nodded, but I couldn't promise him that. I couldn't promise anything. How could I, when I had already failed so badly? Asterisk, we spent the next few days going through the paperwork, trying to piece together what had happened. I dug out the bank statements, the receipts, and the texts I had kept from him, hoping there might be some sign that things weren't as bad as they seemed. But everything pointed in one direction. The money was gone, and so was he. Asterisk, it was in the middle of this mess, this confusion of numbers and papers, that my son found something that I hadn't even noticed before. It was a small detail, something I had overlooked in the rush to help him, in the flurry of emotions he had stirred. In me? There's no record of this transfer, my son said, his voice tinged with disbelief. He held up the phone in his hand, the one I had used to give him my bank information. Mom, look here. You gave him the wrong account number. Asterisk, my heart stopped. Asterisk, the reality of what had happened hit me like a wave, knocking the breath out of me. The money had never even reached him. I had trusted him enough to give him my account details, but somehow I had gotten the wrong information. I didn't know how it happened. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe it was part of the plan all along. But either way, it didn't matter. The money had never been his to take. Asterisk, I felt the blood drain from my face. A cold sweat began to form on the back of my neck. I had been so blinded by my own emotions, by my desperation to feel wanted, to feel seen, that I hadn't even questioned something as simple as the account number. No money, no explanation, no answers. Asterisk, my son tried to reassure me. We'll find out who took the money, Mom. I'll get in touch with the bank. We'll get it sorted. But his words felt empty. The damage had already been done. I had allowed myself to be fooled, and now, even if I got the money back, it wouldn't change what had happened. Asterisk, I sat there in silence for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. It was like I had been living in a dream, a beautiful, comforting illusion that had suddenly shattered. I had thought that he cared for me, that he wanted something more than just my money, but all along he had been using me. I wasn't a person to him, I was just another means to an end. Asterisk, the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at him, but at myself. How had I let myself fall for it? How had I allowed my loneliness to cloud my judgment, to make me believe in something that wasn't real? Asterisk, Mom, my son said gently, breaking through my thoughts. I know this hurts, but we can fix this. You're not alone. I felt a spark of hope, a tiny flame that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. I never should have let this happen. I should have been smarter. Asterisk, he shook his head. You don't have to apologize. And next time, I'll make sure you don't make the same mistake again. Asterisk, I nodded. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about something much deeper. It was about the trust I had lost, the part of me that had been taken without me even realizing it. And though I was starting to understand what had happened, the pain of it still lingered, sharp and raw. Asterisk, but I wasn't going to let it define me. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but it would happen. I would make sure of it. Asterisk, the days after I discovered the truth felt like a slow, unbearable climb. My son helped me with the bank with getting in touch with the authorities, but there was only so much they could do. The money had been transferred to an account I couldn't trace, and despite their best efforts, they couldn't track it down. I was left with nothing, not the money, not the man I thought I knew, and not the peace of mind I had once taken for granted. Asterisk, there was a part of me that kept hoping things would go back to normal, that I could somehow fix everything. I tried to stay busy, going through the motions of my routine, watering the plants, making dinner, keeping the house in order. But each action felt hollow, as if I were playing a role in my own life. The loneliness I had felt before his visits had now turned into something much darker. Asterisk, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the lies, about how I had been so eager to believe that someone, anyone, wanted me, that I had failed to see the warning signs. It wasn't just the money, it was the trust, the heart I had so freely given away. I had let him into my life, into my world, and he had taken more than I ever realized. Asterisk, I hadn't seen him since the day I confronted him on the porch. There were days when I thought about going to the bakery, standing in front of him, and demanding an explanation. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. He had already taken what he wanted from me. There was no going back. Asterisk, one afternoon, sitting by the window, my son sat down next to me. He had been quiet for the past few days, trying to give me space, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He had done everything he could to help me get back on my feet, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling of defeat that was creeping into my soul. Asterisk, Mom, he began, his voice softer than usual. I've been thinking, I know you're angry, and I know you feel like you've lost a lot. But you haven't lost everything. You're still here. You're still my mom. I wanted to push him away, to say I was fine, but I couldn't. He was right. I had lost a lot, but not everything. I still had my son. I still had my memories, and I still had the chance to rebuild. Asterisk, I know it's hard, he continued, his eyes full of empathy. But you've got to stop blaming yourself. You can't keep punishing yourself for what happened. I know you feel embarrassed and you're hurting, but you don't have to carry this alone. Asterisk, I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the grief I had been suppressing. It wasn't just about the money or the betrayal. It was about feeling invisible, like I had become an afterthought in my own life. My own vulnerability, the loneliness that had crept in, the fear that I was running out of time, all of it had led me to this moment, a place where I had lost myself. Asterisk, I don't know who I am anymore, I whispered. I don't know how to get back to where I was. Asterisk, my son put his hand on mine, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. You're allowed to let go of the shame. I'll be here every step of the way. Asterisk, I looked at him, feeling a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Maybe I would always carry some of this pain with me. But I had my son. I had my strength, even if I didn't fully see it yet. And I had the chance to rebuild my life piece by piece. Asterisk, I'll try, I said quietly. I'll try to let it go. I just need time. Asterisk, and that was enough. I didn't have to fix everything in one go. I didn't have to have all the answers right now. I just had to keep moving forward, one small step at a time. Asterisk, as my son sat beside me, I realized something else. The house wasn't as empty as it had felt before. I wasn't as alone. Even though the hurt was still there, even though the betrayal still stung. Over yet, but I was ready to begin again. It wasn't easy, learning to forgive myself. The days that followed were filled with small victories, the kind you don't always notice at first but realize later. When you look back, I started taking walks around the neighborhood again, something I hadn't done in months. The fresh air, the gentle rustling of the leaves, the chatter of the birds, it all felt grounding, like I was slowly reconnecting to a world that had seemed so distant during those painful weeks. My son had gone back home after a few days, but he promised he'd call regularly. I couldn't deny that having him close, even just for a little while, had given me the strength to face things I'd rather ignore. As much as I hated admitting it, the feeling of being cared for, of not being alone, had helped me more than I could have imagined. I still hadn't gone back to the bakery. Part of me wanted to confront him, the man who had taken so much from me, who had made me feel foolish and vulnerable. But every time I thought about it, I felt a tightness in my chest, a hesitation that stopped me from going further. The man I had trusted wasn't the person I had imagined, and I didn't think I would find any peace in confronting him. The only way forward was to stop looking back. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, I ran into an old friend of mine, someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Edith. We used to spend hours together, chatting about everything under the sun, our children, our dreams, our favorite books. Time had changed us both, but seeing her there, standing under the shade of a large oak tree, felt like a bridge to my past, to a time when life wasn't so complicated, Zelia. She called out, her face lighting up with a smile that felt like a piece of home. I can't believe it's really you. I walked toward her, smiling back, feeling a little hesitant at first, but that hesitation quickly melted away as we exchanged hugs. We talked for hours, catching up on old times, and I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in a long time. Her presence brought a sense of comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed. Somewhere in the middle of our conversation, Edith mentioned her church group. She had been attending meetings there for years, and it had become a source of support for her. "You should come with me, Zelia," she said. "We meet on Wednesdays. It's a place to share, to heal, to find peace." At first I hesitated. I hadn't been to church in a long time, not since my husband passed away. But there was something in her voice, something in the way she spoke, that made me feel like it was exactly what I needed. Maybe I wasn't ready to fully let go of the pain, but I was ready to stop hiding from it. I was ready to start looking for the strength I knew I had inside me. That Wednesday, I went. I sat quietly at the back of the church, feeling a little out of place, but also strangely at ease. The meeting began with a simple prayer, and as the group shared their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, their fears, I felt something shift within me. These were people who had known loss, who had faced the darkness and come out the other side. They weren't perfect, but they were strong in their own way, and in their words. I started to hear the echoes of my own healing. When it was my turn to speak, I almost didn't know what to say. But then, the words came, slow and steady. "I've been through a lot recently," I said, my voice wavering. "I trusted someone, and I was hurt. I lost something important to me. But I'm trying to learn how to forgive myself. I'm trying to learn how to let go of the guilt." It wasn't easy to say, but once I spoke those words out loud, I felt the weight on my chest lift, even if just a little. The others nodded in understanding, their eyes full of compassion. I wasn't alone. In this dot, as the meeting ended, Edith walked up to me, her eyes full of warmth. "You did well, Zelia, you'll get through this. We're all here for you." I smiled, feeling a little lighter, a little less burdened. I wasn't sure where the road ahead would take me, but I was starting to see that it didn't matter. I had a choice now to stay stuck in the past or to embrace what lay ahead, to learn to forgive, to let go, and to reclaim my life, piece by piece. That evening, as I walked back home, the streets felt a little less lonely. I wasn't sure if I had forgiven him yet, if I ever would, but I knew that I was finally beginning to forgive myself, and that, for now, was enough. The months that followed were quieter, gentler. I wasn't healed completely. I don't think anyone ever fully heals from a betrayal like mine, but I was learning to live again, to find new rhythms in the life I had rebuilt. Slowly, I let go of the anger and the shame, and though I still had days where the memories would resurface, I had learned how to quiet the storm within me. I continued to meet with the church group every week, and each time I walked into that room, I felt a little stronger. The people there, with their own stories of loss and recovery, helped me see that I wasn't alone. They didn't pity me. Instead, they gave me strength, showing me that no matter what happened, I had the power to take the next step. I wasn't just an old woman, a victim of someone's manipulation. I was someone capable of standing tall again, of building a life that was mine without fear. Without guilt, I hadn't heard from him since the day I confronted him. Part of me wondered, if I ever would, maybe he had moved on, as he always seemed to do with everything in his life. But I realized that, after everything, I didn't need closure from him. I had all the closure I needed within myself. I had given him too much power for too long, and now it was time to take that power back. Not for revenge, but for my own. Peace. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. The world didn't feel as heavy as it once did. The house, once empty and full of painful memories, now felt like home again. It was mine, filled with the small, simple things I had always loved. The plants on the windowsill, the quiet hum of the neighborhood at dusk, the soft glow of the streetlights coming on as night fell. The future held, but I knew that I had learned something vital, that even in the darkest of times, there's always a way back. It might not be the same as it was before, but that didn't make it any less meaningful. The strength I found in myself, the quiet courage to move forward, was something no one could take away from me. And then one Sunday, I made the decision to visit the bakery. It wasn't because I wanted answers or closure, but because I needed to take back the space he had once occupied in my heart. I walked into the little shop, greeted by the warmth of the oven and the smell of fresh bread. The young man behind the counter smiled, and though he didn't recognize me at first, I recognized him. He was a stranger now, someone I would never again let into my life. "I'd like a loaf of your best bread," I said, my voice steady. No longer trembling with the fear of facing him, he nodded and wrapped the bread carefully, a courteous but distant gesture. When he handed it to me, I took it without a word of thanks. I didn't need to thank him anymore. I had learned what I needed to know. The bread wasn't important. The act of walking in there, of standing on my own 2 feet and facing the past with quiet dignity, was everything. As I left the bakery, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had faced the source of my pain and walked away stronger than before. I wasn't sure what my future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. The sun was setting as I walked back home, the colors of the sky fading into a deep orange. The street felt familiar, like a quiet path that had always been mine to walk. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first met him. I had lost something, yes, but I had gained so much more strength, peace, and the knowledge that I could move forward no matter what. As I stepped through my door, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I had, for the love of my son, for the friends I had made, for the lessons learned the hard way. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. And with that, I closed the door behind me, stepping into the quiet new beginning of my life.